pushed over like that, and I'm over getting backaches from it. Just from teaching all day,
Sure.
when you're,
Okay, hi everyone.
Okay, we're recording and streaming. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Good call on this.
Yeah. All right, good evening, everybody. It is the personnel meeting of October 18th, 2021. It's 4:49 and I will call this meeting to order. We have Chair Member Tower and myself here along with Superintendent Anderson. And Chair Tift, not Chair, Board Member Tift will not be with us this evening. So we can go ahead and proceed. Anything anybody has to add to the agenda? We have communication support and the transition plan for superintendent.
Yeah, I'd like to, under the other issues, I'd like to add long-term administrator services or substitutes.
Okay.
just in general?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a huge issue out in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All kinds of people needing
Yes.
time out.
All right. So first order of business would be the communication support.
And I'll speak on behalf of Ann Robertson, who came up with the proposal. She's done several great things since she's been here. One of the things that she's really focused on is that we have, currently we pay a teacher at the high school to provide social media messaging and other communication support for the high school. We pay that person $1,500 per year. What we'd like to do is add contacts at Sunnyside, Burnside, and Twin Bluff to do similar work. We'll wait until the feedback is gone.
My thing's off.
You have your microphone muted?
Yeah.
Oh. There, maybe it's better now. Hold on. This is why we need Jennifer Tiff. She's our, oh, yeah. Hello?
I'm still here.
There we go. Turned off the speaker.
Oh. which
So
speaker?
can, right there.
That one, okay, so I know for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, good,
And once you've done that, then it should log in that way.
that way, got it.
So we got that figured out. So anyway, our thinking is that, we'd have Sunnyside, Burnside, and Twin Bluff staff members who could be paid about those amounts. Typically, we would involve the teacher negotiations group in determining the exact salaries, because if there's a teacher who does it, usually that's done through the contract, doesn't have to be, but that's typically what we've done. And so those are just estimates. Do you guys have any questions about what we're thinking?
So you said $1,500 a year is what we're paying out now, so this is $1,750, so roughly $250 more, right? Am I doing that right?
Well, the $1,500 plus the $1,750. So the extra cost would be $1,750 for the district.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, and we figure that the $1,500 amount is, that's almost half the district, a little bit less than half. And so this would compensate for work done at the other three K-12 sites.
And what about Cobble here?
Yeah, I just noticed that that's not included there, so I'll need to talk to Ann to see what she thinks about that.
Because I do know that they post things too and have.
All kinds of events.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're very active on social media, so.
Yeah, I'll find out if they have a current secretary doing that as part of his or her
Or
workload.
if they work with community ed.
Yeah, or maybe community ed does it, or, I'm
Is Dawn
not
on
sure.
the call?
What's that?
Dawn is on the call. Do you
Oh.
know Dawn is community?
Yes, we do. Brittany does it, and then we have our ECFE teacher does it. So, but I think that should be considered also. So that would go back to Anne. That would be great as a consideration, because I think it would just then make it like the rest of the district, since it is a Red Wing school.
Right, yes, it should be consistent. And perhaps then, are we thinking that Anne would kind of lead all of these people and provide support to them then, so that we're all having the same criteria for posting, and Anne knows then what's going out, what's coming in,
You
and is
said it-
monitoring those things as well?
Yeah, you said it better than me.
Okay,
Yeah, that's the kind of thinking. So
okay,
we'd have similar expectations for posts. We'd have some standards that people would have to follow. There'd be monitoring. I don't know if Ann would see every single post, but would definitely be monitoring kind of overall.
well, somebody needs to see every single post if we're going to adopt that policy that's being considered by the full board. Somebody has to be the checker on that, so if we're gonna be consistent across the board, we need one person looking at everything.
Yeah, I'll run that by Ann just to confirm.
And it sounds like there's a team of people that we're building for
Right.
communications. So right now we have Ann, we have the high school person, Jill,
Yep, Jill Rivard does our website,
Yep.
maintenance.
so she's probably part of looking at what's going on. So Ann, Jill, and then high school, and then adding 3 more, possibly 4.
Right,
So it would be a team of people that hopefully Ann could provide some, like PD or staff development around what we're looking for, wording. So like you said, we have to be aware of everything that's going out. That group of 7, I would envision, would be alert on what's going out, and then tying it into one person who could delete it.
right.
Because I don't know who the deleter is right now. If there's somebody that, like if somebody puts something pretty egregious out there, it does get deleted.
Mhm. Yeah, and Jill does much of that, but that was before Ann started. And so I'm sure that'll change now that Ann is here.
Well, however they do it is great, but it sounds like there's gonna be a pretty intelligent group of people working on this
Oh, yeah.
together.
So is Kristen Bray still doing stuff too, or is it just Jill?
Yeah, she'd be the high school person doing the social media post, the current one.
Okay, so how do they divvy up the 1,500 a year?
Kristen Bray does that for $1,500.
Okay, so it's not.
Jill's is separate.
Yeah, Jill was sort of doing, she works
The
on an
website,
hourly
yeah.
basis and kind of does district-wide posts and those kinds of things, but that'll transition more to Ann. Now, for example, if there are posts that should be on the district website, for example, then Jill is still involved with making that happen on the website.
And you did say why it's more for Twin Bluff, but I missed it because I was fiddling with my.
It's a larger school right now.
They have more students?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they also have a tool, which I don't know where that communication goes, but is that community ed?
Oh, well, that could be, depends on the activity.
Right,
Could be
and so,
activities or it could be community ed.
like I talked about prior, that's the only place where kids get swimming lessons in the whole,
Yeah, swimming lessons would go through, I mean, if it's a community ed.
I'm talking about like school provided swimming lessons. Not community ed, but actually school provided. That's
Yeah,
where everybody goes through to get their first dose of swimming lessons if they've never gotten it at community ed or the YMCA.
yeah, then that would be it'd be a Twin Bluff expectation, I would assume, because the programming is happening at Twin Bluff. Just like a FACS-related program at the high school would go through the high school.
Okay, all right.
But you're right, that's one of the things that Twin Bluff has that the others don't.
So would these additional things be in the teacher appendix, or where are we gonna, under contract, or where are we gonna put this?
Yeah, typically that's where it would go, would be the teacher agreement. That does not mean that only teachers can apply for the job.
Yeah.
But that's where we've been putting a lot of those extracurricular contracts, or, like the weight room supervisor and those kinds of things. But it's really open to anyone.
Right.
If we hired a non-teacher then that person might be salaried or hourly, depending on who we hire.
Would it have to be somebody that works in that school full-time?
No,
Somebody that works in that school part-time?
not necessarily.
They don't have to work in that school at all?
It would, I think, be open. However, there are huge advantages to have somebody who's working in the school, just because they know what's going on, they know the people.
Yeah,
They know what to highlight in the posting, so that's a huge advantage there. The advantage to having somebody working who's part-time there, or maybe not working, is that they might spend more time, on that kind of work. But my guess, the target will be people who are working in each school,
okay.
because they're there on a daily basis, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm all for it. I do have to say, it's hard though when I know there's $500 here, $600 there. I just want to make sure that we're not overreaching. Even though it's not a huge sum of money, I want to make sure that we've got that money
Mhm.
with everything that we've been paring back.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, we cut back on our contract with Unleashed Consultants. And so that was about $3,000 per month. And so this would come out of that savings.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's totally separate from our budget reconciliation process, because we just made that change here October 1st.
sure.
And
And
so it come out of that savings.
That 3,000 is including the 1,500 for the high school.
No, that was a totally separate.
Okay, so
Mhm.
I don't see, so it'd be 1,000, it would be 1,750 out of the 3,000?
Well, the Unleashed contract was for $3,000 per month,
Right.
so it's about $36,000 per year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so this, the $500 is, like for Sunnyside, that's per year.
So that's quite a savings.
Oh, yeah.
So
And
we're not losing money in
No.
this situation.
No.
Does that make sense that way to you, Pam?
Well, I also thought though that some of that money from Unleashed Consultants went towards our communication director's salary,
Some of it did,
but not all of it.
right.
So we
Mhm.
still are ahead on the deal.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm fine with that. I think, there's a lot going on in social media. I think that it's important to get the same message, the right message out. We've got a lot of things that we need to celebrate and things that are going well. And so, yeah, I think you're right when you talk about the team. And that's fun. And hopefully they will build a team kind of approach to all of this, but I think this is a great idea.
I do too.
Yeah, and again, the dollar amounts, should be negotiated with the teacher group. But I think, it's a consensus here, and so then we'd ask the the negotiations team to consider that as part of their proposals.
Okay.
So then it would stay as a teacher position.
Well, even if something's listed in the teacher contract, does not necessarily obligate us to hire a teacher.
Okay,
It's just if a teacher's hired, then that's the amount that they
Okay.
can get.
got it.
I'll give you an example, it'd be like our coaches, junior high coaches.
Got it.
They're listed in the teacher contract, but we hire non-teachers all the time.
So it'd be part of extracurricular
Mhm.
in that whole big
Yeah,
piece.
it
Okay.
would still be, be part of that appendix,
Mhm.
but it'd still be supervised by hand.
Yes.
So,
Good.
Great.
I'm totally fine with that.
Fantastic. The next item has to do with transition planning for the superintendent. And, this is a reminder that we've done other transition planning in the past. And I just want to briefly highlight this since we have a little time. Debbie Lundberg, for example, is a part-time employee who works with our relatively new Ed 5 Student Services Coordinator. Thank goodness, because it's a complicated area and Debbie has expertise that she can share. Kevin Johnson has been working with Alan Gaylor. And Kevin has expertise in buildings, grounds, and technology, which is really nice as he works as a part-time employee. And we expect him to work perhaps 3 years total as a part-time person before he's obligated to retire. Chris Clausen also worked part-time this past year, helping with Joni Gorman. So those are all three really key pieces that came in handy when we dealt with COVID. And you can see some of the other positions that that we had to transition during that time. So anyway, at some point, I said that while we should look at transition planning for other district and building administrators, because you always want the backup plan, you want the transition plan whenever possible. So at an earlier meeting, we did discuss this at one time, and there were 3 things discussed: full-time director of administrative services, full-time director of finance, full-time assistant superintendent. Committee members at that time asked for more information on 2 of the options: the director of administrative services and an assistant superintendent, just to kind of see where it will land. By the way, we all recognize there are financial constraints. And so I'm not asking this to help me or anything like that. This is truly kind of transition planning so that we have a super smooth transition, when I leave the district. So the first option would be a director of administrative services. This person could oversee buildings and grounds, technology, infrastructure, food services, maybe the business manager, although we may want that as a separate individual reporting directly to the superintendent. Human resources, communications, transportation routing, and any other areas that do not require superintendent's license. There are some advantages, and that is, if one of those individuals leaves the district, then we have somebody who works really closely with that person who's able to bridge the transition. So for example, and I hope this never happens, but if, let's say Brent Lexvold leaves the district, if we have somebody overseeing him as a director of administrative services, then he or she could really help in the transition as we look for a new director, for example. And again, the other advantage is that, if somebody's in place, at the time when I leave the district, resign or retire, then the superintendent could focus on the areas that require an administrative license, whereas this person could just deal with everything else and, would help the incoming superintendent that way. Costs would probably be about $145,000 per year. That would be salary and benefits like health insurance. So
What would be the licensure area that we'd be looking at for this position?
it would not require an administrative license. It's preferred, but it wouldn't require one.
What would it require?
Oh boy, different districts do it different ways. Usually they would not require any kind of license from the state of Minnesota. So you wouldn't require a teaching license or a principal's license or anything like that. It would really be wide open. You look possibly for maybe an internal candidate who is well-versed in one or more of these areas. You could look at an external person, either from another school district or even from the private sector.
Are we talking bachelor's degree, master's degrees,
Likely it would be a bachelor's degree.
Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts in any capacity?
Either or. Mm-hmm.
Because if we're paying $145,000 with benefits, I would expect a master's degree at that level.
And now 145 would include the benefit
Right,
costs.
that's what I'm saying, with
Yeah.
benefits.
Yeah, maybe. It would, after, let's say if a personnel committee on the school board said, yes, we're gonna hire a director of administrative services, or consider it strongly, then we would come up with a position description, include either a master's or a bachelor's degree expectation, and then we get it rated based on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this
really
person though, as a bachelor's degree, would oversee all of these different departments: buildings and grounds, technology, infrastructure, food services, business management, human resources, communications, transportation, and routing. I mean, that's a big job.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying.
Am I,
Nope,
I mean, I
you're not.
don't
That's
need
what
to
I'm
put
thinking.
anybody down. I mean, I think there's plenty of great candidates out there. However, that's a humongous job with a humongous paycheck.
Right, to me, it would almost be an advantage to have an administrative
Yeah,
license.
that's kind of where I'm
Somebody
going
who
with
could
that.
step in the event of whatever.
Oh,
But in a,
definitely.
right, like in a
Yes.
school capacity, hiring outside of the licensure area trips us up. Because we're paying an exorbitant amount of money in school district dollars for somebody that can't necessarily, in a small district like this, step in the event.
Yeah, clearly, it's advantageous to the district if we hired someone, let's say with a superintendent's license, to fill this role. Because then, if I died in a car accident or something, then this person could fill in like that. Ideally, that would be the case. The problem with requiring it is that then you significantly limit the pool.
I'm not thinking superintendent, I'm just thinking administrative license.
Like a principal,
Yes.
for example.
Somebody who can, in the event that, we have something where somebody is out for 2 days and we need somebody who's, instead of paying a sub-pay for administrators,
Mhm,
which we're not doing yet,
mhm.
but we're at the point in districts where if a principal is out for a portion of the day, it's a big deal
Correct.
at all levels.
Yeah, and that, the more licensures somebody has, the more advantageous it is to us.
Right, so I wouldn't say necessarily superintendent, but I would definitely think an administrative license.
Yeah, it's gonna depend on how wide we want the pool to be.
Yep.
And so that would be our decision together, because the more expectations that we have, or more requirements, it's gonna limit the pool even more.
Yeah.
But
But
you're
what
right,
would the
there's a
base
trade-off.
be, the base salary be,
Oh,
approximately, because this isn't set in stone.
maybe 100 to 110,
Okay.
I would guess.
Yeah, I would like to see some type of, if we go in that direction, which is cheaper than the assistant superintendent, which is where my head's at,
Mhm,
some type of an administrative license.
mhm. Yeah,
And those
that's-
are, the business management, the HR pieces. If that person isn't supervising principals, right?
Right.
Then their jobs are different.
Right,
There's a
and
lot
that's-
of work in supervising principals.
And that's why it'd be a lower salary
Right.
than an assistant
Mhm.
superintendent. Yeah.
So then I would see that job breakdown as, you would do all the other, and I know you're doing all these things now.
Mhm.
And what would be left then, like all the supervision of the admin team?
Yeah, so this is, and again, this is kind of, this is the
Right.
exact discussion I want.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly. What this proposal would say is that if there's a position that does not require to be supervised by a superintendent, then this person would do it. Then everything that requires a superintendent's license would be my responsibility, or whoever the superintendent is. So, principals, special education director, early childhood director. There are some miscellaneous ones in our district, like
community ed,
community ed, our director of community education and recreation.
that's superintendent,
Right.
right?
You need a license to
Yep.
supervise those people.
Mhm.
In our district, we have the district-wide school nurse, that would require a
For
principal or
instance-
superintendent license.
If this person had an administrative degree, they could help with teacher evaluations. That process,
Yes,
not doing them, but helping with that process for administrators,
or do them.
or do them.
Mhm.
But I'm seeing it branch out just a tiny bit, because that's an enormous piece.
Mhm.
That's a checkbox from the state that we can't ignore.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly somebody with a principal's license or superintendent's license gives us a lot more flexibility. Some schools would have like elementary principals supervised by one person and secondary principals supervised by another.
Mhm.
We're not a big district, so I don't think that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I would only recommend this if there's kind of a planned transition that might be happening, in the near future. So, if I'm gonna leave like within a year, 2, or even 3 years, then I think it makes sense to bring in somebody sooner than that,
Mhm.
so that he or she can really understand Red Wing schools before I leave. And
Yeah.
then it's just a super easy transition.
That's what I read it. They would help in the transition. It wouldn't have to be an assistant superintendent, but it could be an administrator that could help in the transition to whatever it looks
Exactly.
like down the road.
Yep, and so there'd be an overlap of some
Yes.
sort, you know,
Well,
however that
and
is.
we've talked about this for a long time at the board level of what happens when you're out.
Right,
And I know that it's fallen on principals because really that's the next line, but
right,
really there should be something in between that. And I will speak for myself and a couple other board members through the years have talked about getting you more support. Because your job is enormous and look at all the things that are listed here. That doesn't even cover your job. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's an enormous job and I know we're not a big school district. And I know the viewpoint is out there that we're too administrative heavy already, but I don't believe that and I don't agree with that. Anybody who comes into the inner workings of this, school district will understand and know that, we do need more support.
What
So,
sold me was, the idea of overlapping with the transition.
yes,
Because
Or
what we
always
do,
being available in the event of a transition.
correct,
right,
Somebody who can hold the key besides you holding the key.
right,
who understands,
Who
already
understands
understands
what's
what's
going
going on. That's to me, that's the key,
Yeah.
because, and we see this in every department in our school. You know, we have good people working here, and then all of a sudden they resign, let's say, take a different job, or retire, and then all of a sudden, you know, it feels like we're starting from, you know, scratch.
And just to go down to the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, that just feels really nebulous. It could include, it should, like, everything we do should be diverse,
Mhm.
diverse, inclusive, and equitable.
Mhm.
And so that, like, a Director of Administrative Services or whatever, that was, my computer went dead, but whatever that title is, should be able to include
yes,
working together as a team on
Oh, yeah.
being more inclusive and equitable. Like, that should be the premise of how we're running the business.
Regardless.
Regardless
agree.
of,
Yeah, totally agree.
yeah, like, then we would be too top-heavy in administration if we gave a job like that to just oversee if we're being equitable.
yeah, for sure, I agree.
And by the way, that's, you're kind of a segue into the second option, which would be just an assistant superintendent.
Mhm.
And, you know, my thinking is, if we went that route, and that person did not oversee the administrative services part, then if we could find someone who brings some expertise or passion or knowledge, you know, and then this person could supervise principals, for example, or some of the administrative services if we wanted to. The biggest advantage to assistant superintendent is that it would pay more. And so we're more likely to bring somebody from the outside who has that passion and expertise. So,
Yes, and not always, right?
right.
Because there's
Mhm.
lots of superintendents out there that don't have what we need,
Mhm.
right? So that amount of money, wouldn't be worth it to me to throw the net out
Mhm.
with the amount of money that we're able to spend, including the business manager contract that we have right now, because we would not be eliminating that, correct?
With these proposals, no. Right,
Right.
we would still maintain that.
Right, and that contract is how much?
I know Jackie's given me the numbers before. I'm gonna say it's 80 or 90,000, right in that ballpark.
Okay.
Jackie, are you on the call? And if so, do you have that number by chance? I don't think she was
I
on the
don't
call,
think
so we
she's
have to,
But,
it's 80 to 90,000.
yeah, so without eliminating that piece, because we're tied into the contract for how many more years?
We can, end it, you know, like with a 60 or 90-day notice.
But there's a penalty.
Yeah, I don't recall the contract specifics.
Yeah, so there's a, we don't want to lose money on,
No, never.
right, on expertise and, passion of somebody that's been working with us.
Can I, maybe, summarize just a little bit where I think both of you are
Sure,
headed?
yeah.
So is it fair to say that, possibly, if we're interested in adding a position for transition purposes, primarily, or to fill in, or whatever
Or because we need it.
rationale, a director of administrative services would be the way to go, but require the principal's and/or superintendent's license. And as with any position, we always want to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion efforts.
Correct.
I don't care if it's a superintendent, an assistant, director of administrative, I don't care who it is.
Right, we'd like to see that on the resume and the cover letter.
Yeah, and with questions,
Right.
are we actually full
We
of
have the
questions?
questions, but when somebody's applying, we'd like to see that as a
Yes.
Right.
strength, a
So
passion.
is that, what I just said, is that kind of, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what I hear.
Yes, and I'm still shying away from a superintendent because of the cost.
Or
Well,
assistant superintendent.
I'm
Yeah,
assistant superintendent.
My feeling about the assistant superintendent option is that I don't want to pigeonhole us into having to look for a superintendent because it's who could eventually become. So it's really a superintendent search. And if we didn't like him or her, then we've spent a whole year or $170,000
If it
plus,
doesn't work out,
and they don't work out, and then they're leaving us, and it's,
then we're lost in
we-
two positions.
yeah, then we've really not done any transition planning.
Right.
So that kind of scares me off because of that reason, so do we try and find someone that we think is gonna be good long-term, obviously, but what if they're not? And then we're
Then,
stuck.
if it's not the right fit, then would you leave that person as the director of administrative services and then hire a different superintendent, or what?
I don't know.
It would put the board in a bind
Sure.
in that capacity, because now we're up two people. If that person didn't want to take the director of
Right.
administrative, or they still wouldn't be a good match for,
Right,
if you hire somebody thinking, I'm gonna eventually be the superintendent,
right,
they might already think they've got the
Right.
job
Right, right,
without having to
Right.
really do a job,
right.
to get a job.
right.
And that's just human nature.
Yeah, in
We've already
other words, we post for the director's position with that licensure expectation, but no promises after a year, after whatever.
No
No
promises.
promises that person would become a superintendent here later.
Right, that's why I like the administrative services. I think we talked about director of operations too. I think we could use either title,
Mhm.
but that's why I think, maybe we don't need an assistant superintendent long-term, but I could see having a director of administrative services or director of operations
Sure.
long-term.
Sure.
Who has no interest in being a superintendent, or
Or does
after
have
working in
interest.
the district
Aspires
successfully.
to that.
Aspires to
Yes.
that, and then whatever board members work with that person,
Right.
that all plays out the way it needs to.
I agree.
Yeah.
Of these two options, that's the one I like the most.
And Holly, you're thinking the same? Okay.
So,
Well, my guess is, and I do want to talk about the next topic, but if we can summarize these in the notes and then at least share it with the board at some point, this is kind of what the committee's thinking. We essentially we looked at three of them. This is the top one, and then that's above the line. And maybe the other two are below the line, or do you want me to rank the assistant superintendent and then the full-time business manager, or what are you thinking? Or just say, this is our option, these are the other two that we take consider.
I would say we're looking at a director of operations or a director of administrative services, and that's what we present to the board.
Okay.
Those two titles with maybe a give and take of what they're responsible for,
Okay,
but not too much different, if it's operations, maybe they stay out of teacher,
right,
or if it's, administrative assistants or whatever, but if it's operations, they could maybe branch into teacher evaluations, however we term it.
Okay.
But I don't think we need to go with, the assistant suit, or I would say just present those two terms, or a position, what else do they call it? Director of operations,
yeah, this is, and this is,
chief director of operations.
yeah, it's all over the board, and and this is just me, everyone's gonna have a different thinking, but when I hear operations, I do not think of communications, human resources.
See, and I do,
Yeah.
but you've worked in that office much longer, but when I think of operations, I think of every way the district operates
Right,
Daily.
daily.
yeah, and really, it doesn't matter what the title is, as long as we can explain it to somebody,
Yes.
so. Do you want me to go as far as, at some point, coming up with a position description, or do you think we should at least share the thinking with, the school board first?
Can't we do both?
Mhm.
Could we explain the thinking around the school board choice and see, or not school board, around the personnel committee choice and get feedback from them? And in the meantime, I mean, we're not doing that tonight, are we?
No.
Right, but it, you know, at the same time, be thinking of what that position looks like and don't get it, what's that called, banded? Like,
Right, yeah, we'd want to shape it.
Yeah, but just so the board can have input.
Yes. And help me remember where we landed with business manager / finance director, because I know we've talked about it, but it's been a while, and
Mhm.
you'll have to remind me where we were
We-
landing with that.
I'll say what I remember, we didn't land with it because we
Yeah.
still have a contract with an outside business manager.
Yes.
So we didn't land in the finance director world because we know, you and I know, we need help in all of the areas because it's a lot.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the one big negative to having a full-time business manager / director of operations or whatever is that, for example, like Jackie's skill set is very unusual. And I don't think, I might be wrong, there might be somebody out there, but I don't think you could find somebody who's licensed as a principal or as a superintendent who could do the work that Jackie does.
Right.
Yes, I get that.
Yeah, I can't.
No.
And I have more experience
She's
in
got
business
more, yeah.
management. She's, you know, and it's not just her, it's also the role of business manager. So that's why kind of keeping them separate gives us more flexibility long-term.
I get that.
And it really comes down to the supervisory piece.
Mhm.
In terms of having an employee from the district supervise employees from the district.
Yeah,
Yeah, so,
that's a big piece.
Mhm.
Okay.
great, well, thank you. Yeah, so we'll try to, Lisa, you and I can work on notes for this particular committee. And then share them with the school board in 2 weeks.
Actually, I'm really excited about this idea. I gotta say, the other piece that we're gonna have to address though is where that money's coming from.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of this transition planning is planning. Doesn't mean that we have the money to allocate towards it, you know, so we're gonna have to make some decisions about that. It's gonna depend on what the school board really wants to prioritize.
Correct.
I think prioritizing connectivity and being on the same page in all areas is a huge benefit to us. And
Current connectedness and connectedness between where we are now and where we
Where
will
we-
be in a year or
for
5 years.
instance, bringing in a communications director has been huge, pulling in several pieces
Right.
of what's going on around the district. That's how I envision this position.
Mhm.
Pulling in several districts, so you're not pulled in 20 different directions when the principals need you.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, I wanna call for this, oh, I wanna call for this, I'm talking to the bus drivers, I'm talking to the,
Right,
right, you wanna administrate the business of the day in the schools,
right.
but not the office,
Mhm. Preferably. Mhm.
right? That's how I envision it,
Yeah.
is somebody bringing it together for you and the district.
Yeah, or for a new superintendent whenever he or she comes into the
Right.
district. Right.
Yes,
Mhm.
the superintendent's position, so you can make the meetings you have to make and not be interrupted by the ones that have to be had.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
yeah, when there's a bus issue, there's a bus
Right,
issue.
you have to, when there's any kind of issue, you have to pull even though you have meetings on the books.
That sounds good, thank you.
I'm
I'll,
excited about that.
I'll bring it, and maybe at some point we'll need a board workshop to really look at personnel needs and then make some decisions there based on priorities and how much money we have and how much we want to spend and how important things are, and so.
The last question I have is, are we in the position of decreasing anybody's salary in current positions now to find the money?
Or attrition, right?
Yeah,
Or attrition, yeah,
Attrition is always a better way of doing it.
that's probably more correct,
Yeah,
to say it that way.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know,
Okay.
yeah, obviously as we vet, costs and position responsibilities, we always look into that.
Okay.
Well, and this might play really well into the planning that we're going to hopefully be having sooner rather than later with the educational planner and facilities and grade configuration.
Right,
Because there might be, who knows, I don't anticipate there being a huge amount of savings in any of that, but, you know, if we're down a couple of teachers because of reshifting and reorganizing and building things, I mean, we don't know.
right,
But all of this really needs to kind of happen in conjunction with one another,
right. Yeah, now's the time to do it.
for sure. Well, I'm excited about that. Good.
Um,
The other last thing on our,
Yeah, the-
long-term admin services or substitutes.
Yeah, long-term administrator substitutes. And, you know, what I'm thinking here is, all of the building or department leaders.
Mhm.
So it include not just principals, but what do we do if there's, a
Food
change-
service,
Food service director?
Right.
How are we gonna transition, or human resources, or anything like that? I thought I would maybe focus now on the principal level.
Okay.
You know, because superintendent and principals, you know, at least come up with plans there. And what I'm thinking is that if there's a long-term substitute need, you know, if one of our principals or assistant principals or other building leaders, you know, needs to leave for a period of time, you know, I thought about all different options, and I thought, you know, maybe the best is just to post for a long-term administrative substitute or substitutes.
that to me would feel the most practical,
Mhm.
to fill that one position. Right? In the event that it happens more than once, is there a sub-pool for principals that we can draw from?
Internal or external?
External.
Yeah, and that would be,
Let's say a principal had to be out for a week, something happened, or an assistant principal had to be out for a week, something happened.
I think for a week we can handle it internally, but if it's a month, you know, or 2 months, or a year for whatever reason, I think that's when we would really jump into the external pool.
Because how I see it handled internally, and this is where I don't feel like we do. I feel like we Band-Aid and everybody hustles harder
Mhm.
on an already full, busy, overwhelming day. So this is, you know, a question that, you know, teachers have to have subs.
Mhm.
You can't get subs for pairs, but when we leave a building without its principal, or the assistant principal has to run it, or a principal has to do everything the assistant principal has to do for more than 2 days, that's not handling it internally, that's just hoping for the best.
Mhm.
That's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of subs
Mhm.
for short term, but if we're talking long term, then I would say post.
Yeah, I
Right,
think that we're all saying the same
Yep.
thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, and I'm mostly concerned, obviously we need to be concerned about all of it, but you know, right now, I just want the long-term plan. And, just so that I have it in my mind, and, you know, we would post internally and externally, I think. And I would probably say administrator substitutes, because if there's any internal movement, then I'd want the ability to find, you know, their
Right.
replacements like that.
Ripple
Why
effect.
would you post it internally?
Because, well, first of all, we may not have any external candidates.
Okay,
So, and, there could be, there might be a person who's already internal, who would want that position. It really doesn't matter, because if there's an external position, we'd always allow the internal people to apply anyway, so.
right, so the reason I say that is,
Mhm.
it feels like we'd be disrupting 2 things
Or
for
3
one
things,
thing.
or 3.
Or 3 things, yeah, it feels like a lot of shift
Mhm.
and disruption for a need that has to be met.
Yeah, or let me, maybe I can say this a different way. If we could find a licensed, high-quality administrator who's willing to come in and fill a void, that works really well. You know, but that may not happen.
Could
So,
we try that first and then go internal?
I think it'd be better to post everything at the same time, and then really hope that we can find external candidates.
Okay, just
That
humor
would
me
save
one
some
more
time.
time. Just
Yeah.
humor me one more time if we didn't post external. We didn't post internal. Just, what would be the fallout if we just went external? You don't think we'd find anyone?
If we did find someone, then we've just lost time. So, for example, if we posted, for, I'm gonna say Tower View principal, because it's
Okay,
not our, we don't
Yeah.
hire that. So if we posted for a Tower View principal, externally for 5 days, maybe we left it open for 10 days to really try to encourage people to apply. No one meets our standards after 10 days, well, then we would post it for another 5 days, and then all the bumping could start from there. I think it's better just to post everything at once. And even if our preference is an external candidate, at least we've already posted it for the internal people if that doesn't work out.
And then if
maybe
we
saves
had
a
to go
week,
internal,
2
the
weeks.
bumping could start earlier.
Yeah, because I see that, it is time. I mean, that's 15 days of sitting on it, and then
Right, yeah, it's all a timing issue.
it is a timing issue.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that, if we have an external candidate that's excellent and ready, and that
Then
could
we just
fill a
do it.
void,
Mhm.
I
and we
would
don't
hope
have
not.
one.
Right, I would hope that we would, and I say this with all of the understanding in the world that sometimes somebody might go, oh yeah, that would be a good, yeah, you really should do that if that's what you, and then it leaves programs or schools, kind of back to square one with what's going on at the other schools.
Right.
Right,
Mhm.
That is my frustration with the internal posting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I get that.
Yeah, like,
I get
oh,
that.
so that person's gonna, oh, great, now what about this school we just left?
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah, and, these, like a long-term substitute is just a temporary thing.
Right.
So there'd be a big change in who does what, that's only a month or 5 months or whatever. That just makes it worse. If it was a long-term solution, then that's different, but when it's
Yes,
just
You're
for a
right, Chris,
temporary
yeah.
time,
then it's like, wait a minute,
yeah.
we
And-
just,
And by the way, I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of every building administrator, but I would guess that every single one would prefer having a really solid external candidate who comes in to finishes it off.
that's
For the
good to
year.
know. Mhm.
We don't have people jockeying for promotions, especially the long-term sub-promotions. There might be some people who would, be able to step in and would want to step in. But usually once the school year starts, you kind of you want to stay the course,
Mhm.
as much as possible. So,
I just don't want anybody to be talked into it either.
yeah,
Like, oh, we really could use you because we don't have X.
yeah, although sometimes that has to happen because we don't have X.
I know, and I'm just saying, but then we won't have X there.
Yeah,
No, I think you post them both externally and internally and just see how the cards shuffle out. I mean, it depends too on which administrator we're trying to fill for,
Right.
True.
what job
And what
that
it,
is.
yeah, what it,
We
what it
don't
entails.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we have a plan and we have an idea, and we might have to go back to the drawing board when we actually know what the position is that we're posting for.
Right.
But, if you're talking just in general terms about any administrator
Or,
or assistant or student, support coordinator, they're different. There might be different circumstances that we
Right.
would be looking at there.
yeah, and there are sometimes, yeah, and kind of what you just said is, there may be some circumstances when if we made an internal transfer, we could actually reduce costs. Maybe, and I'm gonna use a school psychologist as an example. There is no school psychologist who's interested in an administrative position as far as I know in Riverman. So that's why I'm using them.
Right.
But let's suppose that we had a major shift in how many school psychologists are needed. And there was somebody who really wanted to fill an administrative position just for 2 months or something. That might be perfect because we could move that person into their new role without backfilling, the open position. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just.
Yeah.
There might be all sorts of different scenarios that
Right.
might come up, who knows? I mean, we
Right.
can't possibly think of them all, but I think if you post both ways, it gives us the most flexibility in trying to figure out what it is we need at the time.
Right. Sounds good?
All
Yeah,
right,
I'll go with it.
5:40.
5:40. Anybody else need anything else? Okay, we'll get 20 minutes before we have to meet again. So it's 5:39, we'll adjourn. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I don't know, are meetings getting shorter?
I would say It is 6 p.m. All right, in terms of roll call, we have 5 board members present. Board member Tift and board member Derricks are not with us this evening. And we will go ahead and say the Pledge of Allegiance as we start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Anna has agreed to share our mission with us this evening.
The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens.
Thank you. We have listed the agenda for tonight's meeting in the board book. Does anybody have any changes or additions they'd like to make? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Anna made the motion to
Second.
approve, seconded by Jim. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? All right, the agenda carries. The first item on our agenda is the educational plan that is listed in our board book, so I will just call your attention to that. Next in the agenda is recognitions and upcoming events. Does anybody have anything that they would like to highlight?
I do.
Okay.
Oh, I don't go off my mic like that. So I was at the art festival a couple weekends ago. It was beautiful, just a beautiful day, and it was Saturday, and I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Chose, Jay Chose, for, he was at the booth for the, Black Student Union and.
The Native American Student Association.
Yes, the Native American Student Association, and he was very relaxed, having a great time. So it was nice to see him. He didn't see me because I was kind of charging by, but it was nice to see him there.
If
The
I could,
students.
I could also add, in addition to Jay, is that Phil White spent, both Saturday and Sunday down there as well. And working with a great group of kids who have an interest in learning not only about art, but just about, a variety of things. And they were a pleasure to be with.
As well as our own board member, Anna Ostendorf, who was busy sharing her artistic talents with lots of people in our community. So that was a pleasure to see as well. And also it's such a great opportunity for our whole community. So thank you to everyone who puts that on. I think it was just a fabulous event. So thank you.
It's a beautiful weekend.
And a beautiful weekend. Anything else that people would like to share? I will share that I just saw this morning. Our very own now, Ann Jacobson, is on the cover of Today. She has ended her tenure at the Republican Eagle and is now a member of our district here as the communications director. So if you get a chance, definitely read that article. And Ann's commitment and addition to our staff has been outstanding already. She's already been well utilized, and it just kind of underscores for me the importance of having a really good communication plan. She's been very busy, very active. She's got great ideas. So welcome to Ann, and congratulations on this great article.
Yes. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Any other recognitions or upcoming events? We do have MEA break.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah. You want to?
It's always my favorite time of October, when I was in school.
Mine too.
No, it's nice, it started just after Labor Day and get a little break now for staff and students, and enjoy it.
So this Wednesday is a 2-hour early release. So whatever your normal time is that your kids get out, subtract 2 hours, and that's when they will be done with school on Wednesday. So I hope kids enjoy the long weekend, as well as our staff and students. I think we all need a break, and it's been a quick, fast-paced start to the school year, so I think we can all use a few days to catch our breath. So awesome. Anything else? All right, seeing nothing else, the next thing is public comment. I do have one person listed for public comment, Carmen Bertelson. So as you come forward, Carmen, I'll just read the 3 things that we expect during our public comment time with the guidelines. We expect comments to be limited to 3 minutes. We will not discuss as a board the topics that you bring up this evening. We may provide a response quickly, but otherwise we will get back to you on steps that we will take in the future. We expect that comments remain respectful and appropriate and not identify any current or former students, their families, or staff members by name.
I don't really need to come forward if you don't want me to.
The
or-
microphone.
We actually do.
Microphone for the people that are on streaming, can hear
I
you.
just had a question, and I thought it would come up in your upcoming events, and if it didn't, that's the only thing I wanted to address. Okay,
I will go ahead and start this one.
all right,
Go ahead, thank you.
all right. I just have one comment, and it's a question more than a comment, and it's about the Veterans Day celebration. I just wanted to ask a question about what we were actually going to be doing, because I know that was reconsidered, reevaluated, and I report on things from here. So for that report, I need some information. And I don't know if you can do that because you don't,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, and I would need to talk to Mr. Nemenich to verify all the details, but we are planning to host the celebration or the commemoration on Veterans Day, but as far as details, we'd have to get back to you.
Okay,
Kristen Bray is sort of the lead contact, so maybe you could just reach out to her for the specific information.
Kristen Bray, and it's B-R-I-E, like
B-R-A-Y.
A-Y, okay.
Thank you for bringing that up. We are having a veterans, we're gonna be bringing that back. It's gonna be the 12th, Friday the
Yeah.
12th.
Right, I was gonna say-
Oh, that's right, yes, that's right.
That's not-
So it's the day
That's right.
after Veterans Day at 9:30.
And I heard it was gonna be outside, is that right?
You know,
Maybe?
it's.
Depends on the
I'm not
weather.
ready to
Yeah,
discuss details.
okay.
You can contact Kristen Bray. She's does a phenomenal job planning with that and has a passion for, hosting that event.
Okay, that's all I had.
All right, thank you. Nice to see you, appreciate you being here. All right, next on the agenda is COVID-related topics.
Yeah, we just have the information that we've provided in the past in terms of our COVID data sheets, our COVID plan, and other related information. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Like right now? Or you're gonna talk?
Yeah, if you have questions right now.
Okay, I saw your email a couple weeks ago going out to students and staff around wearing masks on the buses, and, has there been an issue with masks not being worn? Or was that just kind of a general, once again, this is what what we need to do?
The concern came to me specifically about wearing masks on buses.
Okay,
And so we met with not only the bus company, but also elementary, or the principals to talk about it. So that was kind of the reason for the email.
okay.
But we wanted to make it more general, because it really is not just buses, it's throughout school buildings too.
Okay, but I think reminders are great, and we're still in, throes of it.
Any other comments or questions about COVID-related topics?
And just
Yes, sir.
give us, our plan, educational plan talks about the COVID and the numbers, where they have to be at a certain time. Let me get the data sheet that's out for today. Maybe you just want to relate or discuss where our numbers fall according to our plan. So people are like, well, when are you going to do something? Maybe a snapshot of where they're falling in relationship to our plan.
Yeah, if you look on the COVID data sheet, you can see one of the rows is highlighted.
Yep.
And so that's the one that we look at. And as we've been since August, we're in the high transmission level. And so We're not close to removing the math requirement at this time if we keep those same standards.
Here's our plan. I don't have it in front of me, I have so many things. Our plan based upon 100,000 residents or 10,000?
Let's see, that should be included here in the packet.
Page 22.
Yeah, 22.
And we're supposed to have the plan up?
It's 100,000.
It's on the page of, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine, I just
Over the
wanted,
past 7 days.
but it's based upon 100,000 people. Okay,
Mhm.
that's fine, I think people need to hear that instead of us saying that the plan's there and not discussed.
Yeah, we're still in high transmission, so.
So range is 50 plus for required high school and middle school and elementary. And, elementary, early childhood and secondary. So when I look at the period ending of 10/9, 265.66, is that in relation to the 50?
Correct.
So we're 215.99 or 0.66 over the 50.
Yeah, we're not even close.
Okay, so I think that's good though, Jen, that we're just kind of pointing out the specific numbers.
Instead of just saying it's there.
Right, saying it's there,
Numbers
so we're still, 215.66 over the 50.
Before we can,
And if anybody does look at this sheet, which I don't know if they do when they're in the board packet, but, from the first week in August, it went from 187 to where we are now, the first week in October, the first full week in October to 265.
thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Anything else? All right, seeing none, school board reports is next on the agenda. Who would like to go first? Finance, any update on finance?
We have a finance meeting next week, so we'll have updates after next week. Right, next week, Monday?
Any updates from the operations committee, Mr. Bryant?
We talked last time, and I didn't see the notes in there today, this weekend. But we talked about, bus transportation issue in Wakuta. An update on the playground at Jefferson School, Twinbrook Middle School. We asked for a continual discussion on a regular topic of Jefferson School at the operations meeting. And we talked about, those are the main three things we really discussed. And Arlen and Jennifer are not here this evening. Do you recall anything else? I don't recall.
Yeah, it was mostly transportation issues for the current year.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the next meeting, which is the first Monday of the month, our transportation options for the next year.
Okay.
We're gonna have an early discussion in November and get the ball discussion rolling as to what we want to look at for 22-23 school year.
The personnel committee just met prior to this meeting tonight. We discussed communication support. We do have a communications director that is overseeing everything that's going on, but we would like to have some social media liaisons per school. And so that recommendation will be coming forward. All of those costs will be absorbed through the money that we save from the consulting fees that we were paying out. So it's well paid for. It's a small stipend for somebody to post things from Sunnyside, from Burnside, from Twin Bluff. We already have somebody here up at the high school, and then we'd like somebody from Cobble as well. So that will help with some consistency, not just having a communications director, but support within each school so they would really act like a team, and making sure that we are following the district policies set out for social media posts. And then we did talk further about transition plans for the superintendent. As always, we like to think ahead and plan for the inevitable future. And so we've been tossing around several ideas over the past several months. You'll be hearing much more about where that might head. But just keep in mind that we continue to have those conversations. If you have some thoughts about, you can read our notes. It's in the, it will be in the next board packet, but just reach out to Jennifer or Holly or myself. But I'm excited about some options and plans that may be coming forward. So we'll have more opportunity to talk about those in the future. And then lastly, we did talk about long-term administrative subs. What happens, what's the plan for if we have any principal, vice principal, student support person, anybody in administrative support, if we need to have a long-term sub, what's going to be our process for that? How are we going to do it? I think we landed on posting both internally and externally for possible candidates when and if we need a substitute in the future for any administrative support. Anything else? Okay.
Legislative and Policy Committee did not meet today because we couldn't have enough of us available. We are planning to reschedule that, and date and time is to be determined.
With negotiations, we've met with the clerks this week and the teachers. We have a bunch of meetings coming up, so things continue to progress pretty well, I would say. So hopefully in the near future, we'll have some contracts coming before you for approval. Let's hope, huh? Yeah. Anything else, GCED, any updates there?
We do not have a meeting in October. We will have our next meeting November 3rd. I'm pretty sure it's a Wednesday, the first week in November. Yeah, Halloween's on Sunday. So yeah, our next meeting is November 3rd.
All right.
And nothing from joint power, nothing from community joint power stuff.
I can tell you that I've been in a couple meetings with Labor Management Committee, and I think there's something coming down the agenda, so I won't go into that. You'll hear a little bit more about that coming up.
The Equity Committee starts meeting again next Wednesday. I just got an email that the meeting seems to be muted. That was 9 minutes ago. I just went in to find the dates of that committee meeting, and that was in my email, so.
Lisa, can you hear us
Melissa
now?
can hear us.
Lisa, are you
I'm
here?
sorry, I had to step out for a moment. What was the question?
Can you hear us now?
Yes, I have no problem. I've been monitoring it on the link as well, and I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully it's resolved then.
Thank you. That would not be good, would it? Any other board updates? All right, then we'll move on to administrative reports.
All right, I'll try to go through these as quickly as possible. First of all, Jefferson Building, we did receive a letter of intent from a group of community stakeholders. Should be included as either an attachment or as an extra in the board packet. We don't need to review it or take action on it now because it will be forthcoming. There was another individual who contacted me about expressing interest in purchasing the school site. I did meet with representatives of the city, which really prioritizes preserving the park at the Jefferson site for use by not only the neighborhood, but the whole community. So I told them that I would at least express that to you, that, you know, regardless of if we sell it or if we lease it out, that, you know, they would have a stake in that particular park. And also just a reminder that federal and state legislation will be, may possibly focus on early childhood programming. And so just a reminder that as we go through the planning process, we'll at least want to factor that into it. Doesn't mean that we should stop the process of leasing or selling, but I think it should be at least made aware that there could be some money and possible expectations from the state or federal government on early childhood programming. And of course, that would require more space than what we are currently using. There was an issue that surfaced right at the beginning of the year again this year about busing students from the downtown area to the high school. And that was resolved. It took longer than what we would want it to, but it was resolved, so they are receiving those services. The kids who are receiving those services now are walking to previously established bus stops in order to get service to the high school.
Holly, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question about Jefferson. And you may not know the answer to this, but this is the one that keeps popping up in my head. If the building were to stay as existed and whatever happens, if Redland Public Schools is part of it or the city is part of it, or does it have to be updated in a certain amount of time for ADA requirements? Just in general, regardless of who's using it? Is there a time frame that happens, or does it have to be updated prior to anybody going into the building? Like, how does that work? Because that's what I need in the back of my head when we talk about what could happen or what, is if the city or the school is leasing it out, whatever we may do. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer offhand. Kevin Johnson would be the logical person who could answer that. And he's not in the office for a period of time, but I will pass that message on, because obviously that's a critical component in all of it.
Right, so, because it could stop or start many things.
Well, and I would say that when we were looking at selling it prior, we sold it as is.
Right.
And the buyers would be in charge of, making the building compliant.
Right, it's
So
just if we're
if we
part of,
keep it.
yeah,
Yes,
we're part
that
of
is a great
anything.
question.
Yeah.
Don't know.
I don't either. And I was always gonna ask, but now I remember.
It is
Yeah,
a great
I'll pass
question.
that question on to Kevin.
Okay, thank you.
The second page of my report, there was an accident in which a driver vehicle hit one of our students crossing the intersection, where Pioneer Road and Highway 58 meet. And so the city is working with a group of people to conduct a safety study. They've engaged with an engineering consultant to look at different options for that intersection. In the meantime, though, we did provide some extra hours to current high school paraprofessionals to at least be out there to make sure that the button is pressed when the kids are crossing the crosswalk before school or after school. We think that was the source of the problem, is that, kids are seeing, the go light, and so they start walking across, just like I would do, but it might be towards the end of the time limit. And so we're gonna have somebody out there to help with that. So we can thank Principal Nemenich for making those arrangements. Jim mentioned the issue about the transportation in Wakuda. Terry Johnson is sort of our lead on that. He's bringing in a safety consultant from First Student to review the situation. I think the best option might be to have our own van, staffed by First Student to provide services for the kids in that area. So he's actively looking for a van driver, but we are going to look at the situation together on Wednesday to see if any other possibility exists, to make that better. So we're making good progress there. There was a request. Oh, I'm sorry.
One
Jim.
question.
Thank you. Yeah, I took a drive down there this weekend. Yeah, 2 weekends ago, weekend before, and I see where that road narrows down, where the green point turn is there. It does narrow, but there is some shoulder that must have been built by the township when they upgraded that road. So it'd be interesting to see what they come up with. I believe the meeting is first supposed to be there at 11 o'clock on Wednesday, if I'm right.
Yeah, some township representatives are going to be there too, so I think it's posted as a.
So I went down there, took a drive down there, and it's been a while since I did. And that's a long ways down, you down there till you turn around. And we talked about having signs. Apparently there's a turnaround that the township built 2 years ago to address this child or children walking all the way up 1.5 miles, 1.75 miles to where they intersect where T's. The bus wants them to walk up here. There's no sidewalk, there's a walking trail that isn't maintained currently during the wintertime. And then that's a little ways up, you gotta get on that by Greenpoint turn. So the parent down there who's at the end, and wants his child picked up, and the bus doesn't want to go down there because of other possible traffic that they might meet. And, there's cars parking down there at this turnaround, which hadn't happened before. And so to talk about no parking signs, and the thing is, 2 years ago, they went down and looked at it and said, yeah, this is fine, so the bus can go down there. Now they've changed their mind. So the parent is not pleased with that decision, and I can understand that. And so they're figuring out something, trying to come up with a resolution before it gets cold. We'll hear more after Wednesday, what they can come up with.
Yeah, my question was just about where in Wakuta, because my parents lived there for 20-some years, so when you drive straight up, it's
When
the
you
T,
take a right,
and you take a right at the T and go all the way down towards,
To the end,
okay.
where the
And
road
then
ends.
there's a turnabout there.
Yeah, so I've never been down that far, but a mile and some is a long ways to walk.
Yep.
With no sidewalks. So I hope it can get resolved.
And it's an elementary kid too, so it's not like, you know, you got a 9th grader or 10th grader, it's a pretty young kid, so,
And it's,
child.
I hope it can get resolved.
Yeah, I think it will.
Well, I very much appreciate the camaraderie, and maybe that's not the word, but, you know, the willingness to problem solve. Because I think that's what we need to do as a district, and I very much appreciate that we're working with the bus company and the family to make it right, make it safe
Yeah,
in all of these instances.
if Terry can find a driver and he's actively looking for a driver, he's already secured the van. We'll have to agree to about a, $30,000 to $35,000 per year expense. And it's okay with me, but, in order to provide the general, education driver and van. So we're working on that possible solution, and we'll see what happens.
It'd be just nice if the bus could just go down there.
Well, it'd be a lot better for everyone. And Terry would, I think, prefer that, if he knew that there wouldn't be cars parked on the drive or the turnabout. So we'll see what happens. Toys for Tots did put in a request to store items just for this year. Just want to let you know, and so we're reviewing that request. There are actually a surprising number of issues related to it in terms of insurance, in terms of how much would we cost, if anything. If we let them use it for nothing, then should we let other groups use the same building for nothing? So I wish we could just say yes and make it happen, but we are looking through the different issues related to the request. Ann Robertson provided, I asked her to give me a list of some of the things that she's done over the past few weeks since she started. It's actually a very impressive list. And sometimes the smaller issues being resolved really have a huge impact. I'm not going to go through this list right now because communications is on the board workshop agenda for a week from tonight, and so I don't want to go through it twice. I will say that she'll cover some of these highlights, and she will also talk about ways that she or we are looking at, making sure we hear from all voices in the community. So that'll be a big part of the agenda topic for a week from tonight. Any questions about that, or?
Just let me know when you're done, totally with your report.
Okay. The next one is a notice from Paul Hartman about the change of color for varsity letters. So I copied and pasted the email that he sent to me and just included in there. And, he gives information about how previous letter winners can come and get the new color and that kind of thing. We've had questions about class sizes and substitutes, so I provided a response there. Also, in terms of class sizes, I briefly mentioned this last time, but Jackie did work on revising our ESSER 3 application and submitted that. And if the state approves it, then we would be able to hire an extra elementary teacher and up to 5 high school teachers for second semester. Now, I know board members asked for, comprehensive plan, not just an application. And so Principal Nemenich is going to provide that information in time for our November 1st meeting. So that is coming, and George will make that presentation as far as if we did hire the 5 teachers for a semester, then what would we do with them?
It'll be the November 8th meeting or the November 1st.
We don't have any days.
Oh, yeah, my written mistake.
So it should be the first?
Should be the first, yeah,
Okay,
sorry about
all right.
that.
Yep.
Well, I have a lengthy report this time. You can see there has been discussion within the high school about a possible security grant. And, if approved by the administrative team and the school board, the grant would essentially provide access to the sheriff's department and or police department over our camera system in case there is an emergency. There are pluses and minuses to it. I have not specifically heard the request, neither has Kevin Johnson. And so we slowed everything down, and after Kevin returns, then we're gonna look at it together administratively. There are obvious advantages. The disadvantages would mostly center on student and staff privacy in terms of sharing that live data with another entity. I know that other public entities have reviewed that possibility and said no. And so that would be something that we would carefully vet before it's recommended to the board. And, I know the board would want to carefully vet it as well, so.
Just out of curiosity, does the public library have such a setup? I'm thinking of public spaces.
I have no idea.
Because to me, it would seem like a huge violation of people's rights. So I'm just curious if there were other public entities that utilize such a system.
Yeah, I haven't.
Like you said, you haven't had a chance,
Right.
you haven't even seen an application.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
That makes sense. If you haven't seen it, you wouldn't know.
Yeah, and that's why, the issue came up when I was in Montana recently, and I said, let's wait. I want to be part of the discussion. I want Kevin to be a big part of the discussion. Of course, Alan Gaylor and other people as well. So it's at the very early stages, and we aren't ready to say yes or no to that. Twin Bluff Playground is essentially installed. There's still ribbons around it, so kids aren't supposed to be playing on it. They had some minor issues that they needed to resolve, such as a concrete slab, some additional fencing in the area. So the playground equipment is there, but we still have a little work to do before we open it up to kids.
Is that extra work needed, costing extra, or is it still all part of that same kind of original pool?
Still part of the original plan. Mhm. We do have ideas for phase 2 of the playground. And you'll see in a little bit, that there was a $10,000 donation that could be used towards that effort. But that's phase 2. We want to get phase 1 going as soon as possible. There were questions about the reporting of leave time, in particular how I submit leave requests and other administrators just in general. So for example, with me, I record my leave time like other employees do. It's in an online leave reporting system. So if I take vacation or sick leave or something like that, I, get that recorded and it's done. Same thing with teachers, paraprofessionals. There are some exceptions. For example, our principals and assistant principals have duty days, not full year contracts with vacation. And so it works a little bit differently there. They're supposed to mark their time away from the office as a non-duty day. We are in the middle of negotiations with the principals group, and so we're thinking about changing the way that's set up. So there might be some changes overall. We've had, as far as I know, we have not had any concerns or complaints about how administrators spend their leave time, but the issue came up, so I wanted to share it with the whole group. The Also, there were some questions about compensatory time. And so you can see Jackie's response in terms of, how district office folks spend compensatory time, those kinds of things. A year or two ago, I think it was 2 years ago, but sometimes the years kind of blend together. I know that Jackie worked with others to really address overtime that's caused by, some of these compensatory arrangements. And so we did make significant changes at that time. So I think the system is working much better now. Oh, remote working expectations. Amy French is going to be working with GCD kind of jointly on preparing information about criteria, kind of best practices for criteria for working remotely. We're not following GCD's lead, they're not following ours, but at least they're going to work together on compiling resources and examples on how we should do that. And so we are working on that. It's kind of a personnel issue.
Yes, I didn't put my hand.
That's okay.
Go ahead. Is there a plan in place currently?
Currently, employees will typically check in with their supervisor to make sure that they can work remotely on different days. We don't mark it, or anything like that. It's gone very well within the district office, for example, and in other areas. I think it gives people some flexibility, but we do want people in the office, as much as possible. We think that gives people the best service, but there are times when it makes sense to have them work from home. So, for example, we've had one person who likes to take work home on a Saturday, for example, and work on a project, because, she can, get a lot of work done in that period of time. We've had another person recently who worked on a report to the state. And so just to kind of clear the office disruptions, she went home and worked on that report, there. So, those things have gone really well. But we would like to formalize that. And I think that was the question that came up is, well, how do we know when to say yes and when to say no? Is someone going to get upset if we say no? Those kinds of things. So Amy is responsible for that.
Okay, because I can see where you say, oh yeah, that's no big deal. I get why you need to do that. Several people could do that in many capacities. So who gets yes and who gets no?
Right.
Who asks, who doesn't, to me it seems to have a policy or some kind of plan in place so that it's not arbitrary.
Right. It's also some of the really simple things, like we want to ensure that a person working remotely can still be reached by phone, for example. Sometimes email isn't good enough, so we want that person's phone number on file in case we have to get a hold of that person. Another example would be to make sure that it's logged somewhere so that the supervisor might know about it, but we also want our Lynn, the district office receptionist, to know about it in case somebody walks in and say, where is such and such, and then Ann can respond.
So there's nothing like that now, like an inboard, outboard where people are?
No, there isn't, but that will likely be one of the suggestions that comes. I don't know if it'd be an actual whiteboard, it might be a Google Drive sheet, I don't know what it looks like. But then we can at least respond to people when they call or stop by. We can say, well, this person is working remotely today, you can reach him or her at, that kind of thing. There were questions about our English language arts curriculum at the elementary level. And just a statement that obviously teachers and administrators are expected to implement the school board Wonders curriculum, because that's what we adopted. We spent, I think, $300,000 on that curriculum, thereabouts. We did meet with kindergarten and first grade teachers to discuss implementation. They were very good meetings, and so I think some changes are going to be coming from that. So we're glad that we solicited that input. And then also Jess, the Director of Teaching and Learning, is willing to meet with stakeholders, or really anyone, to discuss wonders and other curriculum-related topics. So if anyone has questions, they can always contact Jess. Future workshop topics. This is actually something that Jim, Pam, and I are going to review, I think, this week. So these are all tentative. But we've had meeting schedule and format scheduled for October, along with Achievement and Integration Grant, and then also district communications. So those are the things that were kind of slated for October, but, I'd like to defer to Pam and Jim, to kind of finalize those topics for a week from Monday.
And as always, if you have topics, things that we want to dig further into, we'll add to that, so just let us know. Yes.
Thank you. I was hearing some noise while you were talking. It's actually feedback through the in-person attendees on my computer. I could just hear somebody like talking. It was actually a delay. Just real quick also, working remotely, this whole pandemic has created chaos with a lot of different things. One is how people work anymore. Working remotely has really changed than it was 4 years ago. And companies are looking at ways to be how productive they are. They're finding some productivity to be exceeding better than people being in the office. But that still doesn't, I like your thought about what you said. If somebody, you have a better product by being in the office, especially here since we're 8 to 3 or whatever, 9 to 8 to 4 people here that need to see people. If you're there for people that need questions and stuff, it's nothing better than to be present than to work remotely, call, get an answer machine, and then try to go back. So keep that in mind as you look at it, because if somebody's here that people depend upon being here based upon they need questions or something that just happens, then that person probably, rightfully so, should be back in the office as much as possible.
And I was thinking of the collaborative piece. If somebody's not there, then you can't turn to them to collaborate on
That's
issues like, yes, people are working from home, and yes, people are back in the office, and we're not a corporation where we work in cubicles.
right.
We're a people business, paid for by the taxpayers. That's basically my thoughts around that.
Yeah, that's kind of my view of the biggest advantage in person is that there might be a question, and the two colleagues, let's say, Brent Lexel, has a staff issue. And so Amy French, is there, I'm there, and so we can just have a quick, literally 2-minute meeting to go over it instead of trying to line up a virtual meeting or that kind of thing. So
Thank you, Jeff.
I think that's kind of your point. That's all I've got. My longest report ever.
Wait a minute here.
All right, the next piece of the agenda is the consent agenda, which is listed in your board book on page 36.
I would like to make an amendment to that.
Okay.
It's related to overnight trips and the field trips.
Okay.
If we could approve them pending implementation of suggestions by the COVID response team. And it hit me as I was looking through the request. I don't know if it went through the whole process or not. So, and that's my responsibility to make sure that it has, and I realized it when I looked at these. So either we could take them off the agenda for tonight, or we could just change the consent agenda to include that. And I'm sorry, I just broke the overall. I should have pulled that from the consent agenda, and I did, but I just need to stress that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
any of these 6 going on trips before November 1st?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Let me check here.
At least one.
My computer's like going in and out with people.
Oh, people join.
I don't have that.
Yeah, there's.
My network connection is trying to reconnect.
So my question is, if we were asked to approve this, Madam Chair, right?
Yes, go ahead.
We're asked to approve this tonight, but you're telling us we can't approve it with, if also the COVID response being overruled.
Or are you saying that they would provide suggestions and guidance to make the trips safer?
Yeah, for example, I'm looking at, one of the trips to River Falls, its number of students is 7. Elliot Kahn, I'm sure, is driving the van. And so the COVID response team and I would remind Elliot that masks have to be worn in the van, for example. You know, just like all other transportation. If there's an overnight trip, like the environmental, the 4th grade request, we have a lot of different expectations that we would expect in terms not only of buses, but also of, staying overnight. So I apologize for not catching this beforehand. It just hit me that it may not have gone through that extra step.
Does it matter that 3 of them already took place?
Yeah, I looked at those and, really we typically don't include those in the board packet. In the board packet, we just look at the overnight trip request. So,
Let's just approve them. And I don't want the COVID response team overruling the school board, because that's not the idea of the school board here. So.
The only thing I can think of in terms of what Jim is saying in terms of approved, maybe on the bottom of the future field trip, COVID response team check mark.
yeah,
Yeah, like they approved the plan, move it forward to the principal, or the principal back and forth, and there we go.
Yeah,
I think with the Eagle Bluff trip, they included in their application, or, in the proposal, that they understand that a lot can happen between now and May, that, who knows what the requirement, but that they're conscious of following COVID-19 protocols and all of that. So I don't have a problem just approving them.
Madam Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda for today's meeting.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Jan made the motion, seconded by Holly. Another discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I,
Anybody opposed? All right, motion carries 5-0. Donations and grants.
have 4 donations to recognize tonight. First is one from Red Wing Ignite for the Learn and Earn program, $500. American Legion Post 54 in Red Wing, a $400 donation to the high school food shelf. The Southeastern Libraries Cooperative, $500 for diverse materials grant. And then I'd like to point out in particular the 3M Foundation grant of $10,000 to general operations. Their preference would be to use that money towards expanding the Twin Bluff playground. So, it's not necessarily tied to it, but that would be their preference. Then I want to point out Crystal Holt. She's a Red Wing parent who works at 3M, and this is just one example of many times that she's worked with our principals on possible grants, other donations, and so I'd like to recognize her as well, even though her name isn't actually on the document.
What was her name again?
Crystal Holt, Hove. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
You are.
Yeah.
I used to babysit her husband. If that dates me at all.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the folks for donations and kudos to Crystal and what another fine gesture from our community.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Holly. Any other discussion? Because this is a resolution, I do need to take a roll call vote. So we will start with Mr. Bryant.
Aye.
Ms. Tower?
Aye.
Ms. Ostendorf?
Aye.
Ms. Buck?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, that passes 5-0. Many, many thank yous. All right, we have the second reading of our social media policy.
Ann Robertson is available on the phone call or on the call if you have any questions for her.
I wasn't at our last meeting for the first reading, But I did listen, live, to the meeting. And I do have one comment. I am fully in favor of, having this policy. But as we've talked about many, many times here at this table, our policies are only as good as we can enforce them. And so when I read, false information, I get a little bit concerned because, what is false information? What does that mean? And false information according to whom? So that leads me to think that we need some fact checkers. And how deep are we willing to dig for the facts? Is it facts according to personal opinion? Is it popular opinion? How much time are we willing to really dig for the facts? Which makes me also think that could be costly. I mean, that's really could be time consuming. All the other ones I'm completely okay with. I just wanted to call that out and I want to make sure that we're going to do our due diligence if we're talking about if somebody puts on false information. What does that mean? What's false about it? Who's going to do all that digging? Because if we're going to say that we're going to do that, then we need to do it and we need to do it well. So I just wanted to make sure that we think about that.
So, see, I knew it was against me.
Not a good sign.
Technical difficulties, we will take a 5-minute recess. It is 6:51.
Move around.
Yeah, you need somebody to go wave next to the doors.
There.
There we go.
Okay.
Let's keep her 5, because people gave it to them.
All right, we're taking 5. Stretch.
Stretch.
6:56 will continue. We're talking about the social media posting policy, second reading. And so that's all the comments I had about the false information.
I know Ann Robertson is on the call, and Ann, I don't know if you're ready to respond to Pam's question, or if you just want to bring that back to our next meeting.
It sounds like the next meeting.
Sounds like that's just do it then.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
sounds good. Anything else on the social media policy? Seeing nothing then?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer your question
Yeah, go ahead.
about the false information
Yeah, I just
and
wanted,
who are experts. Use the language. Can you hear me?
Kind of cutting in and out.
Anna, you just want to bring back to our next meeting? You're kind of cutting out, like Anna said, in and out.
yeah, we're not hearing you, Ann, so let's, we'll move on in our agenda, but if we could,
Now? Can you hear me now that I shut the video off?
yes?
I'll give it a try. We did run that exact comment was actually run by our attorney. And it's false information and off topic according to our district. So does that make sense?
No.
Not necessarily.
Sort of, I guess, but.
Okay. So for instance, things that are, absolutely provable that we know that they're true. Somebody puts on their social media, they never translate anything into Spanish. They're not being fair. Oh, yes, we do. Our messages are translated into Spanish. We have something that's not true. False information. Let's say that we don't enroll new students during the school year. That's false information, and we will remove that. Or if something is off topic, for instance, it's about a high school concert. Somebody wants to start berating, a teacher about something that's not germane to the specific post, and we would remove that.
That makes sense.
Yes, all of that makes sense, but I just think there's lots, I think our society right now is very much into false information. I think we could be getting down into a rabbit hole of, well, I found this story, or you found that story, and that's part of the issue of our larger society right now. So I just want to know that we're prepared. That's probably going to come up, and who's going to fact check that? Who's going to make sure that we've got to cover that?
I'm aware of that, and we're ready to address anything like that comes up. So thank you.
Yep, thank you for addressing that. I appreciate that a lot. Does anybody else have any other comments, questions about the policy?
I'm actually just really pleased with it.
Yeah.
Right? Didn't even know we necessarily needed that, but we definitely need it.
We do. I agree.
So shocked over there in that little blue shirt.
No.
Good thing. Already ran once today.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Business item number 2, the combined polling place resolution.
Yeah, I'd like to hand it over to Lisa, who compiled the resolution and contacted the entities involved. So Lisa, could you just briefly explain the resolution?
Yes, good evening, everyone. It's a little different actually being a part of the meeting. So what the resolution consists of is every year the school is required to sign or approve a resolution that will combine or select polling places if the school selects to hold an election that does not coincide with a state or federal election. And the reason we combine polling places is to reduce the number of polling locations for the school election and also to reduce costs. So I have contacted the entities listed on the resolution to verify that they are still eligible as polling locations and that we can still utilize them if during the calendar year of 2022, the school chooses or selects to have a special election.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
So there's a recommendation there.
I move to approve the attached resolution establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the day of a statewide election.
Wonderful. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Motion made by Anna, seconded by Holly. All those in favor say aye.
We need to have it's a resolution.
Oh, it is a resolution. Thank you. Resolution. All right, this time we'll start with Ms. Tower.
Aye.
And Ms. Ostendorf.
Aye.
Ms. Buck?
Aye.
Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, so that passes 5-0. Thank you for that catch.
Thanks again, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, health insurance.
Jackie Paradis, our business manager, is here to present the renewal rates for 2022.
All right, good evening, everybody. The rates proposed by Blue Cross Blue Shield, the final rates are in your packet. It is an average 5% increase for next year. As you can see in the paragraphs there, the LMC did, and Intelligence did some work to bring them down to 5%, and is recommending approval tonight.
And I just have to say kudos to that group because they really advocated for themselves and they came in much higher. But they said, look,
The numbers
do
don't justify
that.
it.
And, you know, thank you to the people who negotiated that down to 5%. I think that was, it doesn't hurt to ask, and they were willing to work with us. So that was awesome.
Do we know what the cost to the district will be as a result of that?
It'll be approximately $150,000, again, but pending negotiations with many groups.
We had budgeted 7%,
We had budgeted 10.
10%.
Okay.
So basically, potentially half of what we budgeted.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Which is huge.
Yes.
Potentially half.
Potentially, yeah.
Any other discussion or questions? Yes, sir.
I will be voting abstain. My wife is a recipient of this plan.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then I'm looking for a motion.
I move to approve Blue Cross Blue Shield as the district's health insurance provider for calendar year 2022.
Do I have a second? Second. Motion made by Anna, seconded by Holly. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Abstain.
And abstains. Motion carries 4-1 abstain.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
All right, next, teacher grievance settlement. Mr. Anderson.
Teacher submitted a grievance in the spring of 2021, so just about a half a year ago, about his or her lane placement over multiple years, in particular since the 2015 school year. Human Resources Department and I denied the grievance. So the grievance was presented to the Personnel Committee for review. During the first meeting that the Personnel Committee reviewed it, committee members asked me to resolve the grievance. The resulting memorandum of understanding reflects a discussion between the Superintendent of Education Minnesota and ultimately was recommended by the Personnel Committee. So again, I included the grievance settlement as an agenda packet item. I chose to redact the name of the teacher. It's not necessary that it had to be redacted, but I just think it's a good thing to do. This had nothing to do with a disciplinary action or anything like that. It was purely a contractual issue. And so if you have any questions about the grievance settlement, I'm here to to do the best I can to answer.
Questions, comments?
I do.
Mr. Brett?
Thank you. Well aware of the grievance procedure that union members have. Looking through this grievance settlement, unless I'm missing it, there is no stipulation that the next person cannot ask for the same thing. So this could be a domino effect of others asking for placement when they apparently didn't qualify for the lane change based upon not meeting 9 of the 15 graduate credits in the field that they're teaching. I get the whole idea about settling stuff and compromises and that. I think we're setting a little bit precedent from our staff has stated that this grievance and superintendency was denied based upon those factors not being met. I think we're going to have more people potentially grieve things that our staff has already told them they didn't qualify for. They certainly have the right to go once it's denied from this level to arbitration. That's union's right. Don't take that away from anybody. I think our staff, well, yeah, I think that 9 of the 15 credits are pretty accommodating for that person. Now, if they're allowed to do things that don't meet the 9 or not, if they're into one type of field and they're taking classes in another and want to apply that towards that, I don't believe that would fall into the lane approval that they were seeking for. So, not denying people the right to get further education, I think that's wonderful. But we have a process in place to get the right classes for the subject that you're teaching or trying to get your higher level of degree for. So, plus, I think this is just going to open up a big door for others to try it. So I will not be supporting it.
Yeah, the closest thing I can point out to in the agreement is item number 3, which is on the second to last page, saying that no precedent has been set by this settlement as to the proper interpretation of any of the provisions of the master agreement, or as to any past practice of the district. So at least if there is another challenge about this issue or something else, that this document cannot be, or this grievance or settlement cannot be used, against us, essentially. It's not acknowledging wrongdoing, it's not setting a precedent. So I think that's one really important thing that is present in this particular grievance settlement. What I think Jim is saying is, well, what if there's something else not related to lane placement? Does this still leave that open? One thing that I think is important is there are particular stipulations that are included in the grievance settlement. And I think the important one is that the grievance was submitted in the spring of 2021, which means that it was during this school year. The settlement amount of $3,000 would be slightly less than what the teacher would have earned if a higher lane would have been given at the beginning of the school year. So at least it acknowledges that it was the grievance was submitted during that particular school year, which I think is important to acknowledge as well.
I don't read number 3 the way you do. So no precedent has been set by the settlement as to the proper interpretation of any of the provisions of the master agreement or as to the past practice of the district. So I don't read it the way you read it. So thank you. And that's not what you were telling us. You told us, so your feelings on this a little bit different. So we'll talk about that in Wednesday again.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
You do, but we'll figure it out.
well, I don't. So, yeah, but we can figure it out.
Other comments, questions?
Personnel committee has reviewed this on 2 different occasions. I think the settlement matches with what I think the expectations of the personnel committee was in terms of just resolving it. The actual dollar amount is the part that could have gone different ways. But I think it's consistent with what the personnel committee wanted.
You kind of have answered my question already, but in reading it, one of my questions was that the original grievance was for years 2015 through 2021. And one of my questions was, at what point should that have come forward? Do you know what I mean? Like, how 5 years down the road do you submit a grievance for something that's been happening for a length of time? And just what that expectation is. But you kind of answered my question that dollar amount is based more on that 2020, 2021 school year, which I feel better about, because that to me is a much more concise thing than just this sort of open-ended 5-6 year time span.
Yeah, and there are some changes in the master agreement that should be made. One of them has to do with the lane placement and advancement, which is directly related to this grievance settlement. We've had the same or very similar language since, I think, 1979 or thereabouts. And there's been some information written in the handbook, whereas we have the master agreement with more general language. And so that part needs to be addressed in negotiations. The other part is more related to your comment, Anna. I think the grievance language in the agreement should be addressed. Because of, we don't want to start going back 3 years or 8 years. In fact, our response now is no, that it should be in that particular contractual year. But there's some nebulous language because it talks about an informal meeting to resolve the grievance. Well, is there a timeline that should be attached to that? When does the grievance actually get submitted? What are the time, those kinds of things. And so I think we need to tighten up both sections of the agreement in those areas. But again, our stance would be, no, it has to be within that contractual year.
Other concerns, questions, comments? I'm looking for a motion based on the recommendation by the superintendent.
So
So the motion is I move to approve the grievance settlement as presented.
yes,
Motion made by Holly, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Anna. Any other comments?
I can comment from a personnel perspective that this was not, there were a lot of things that were very clear. There were a lot of things that were done that made sense. And then there were areas that just were not. And within those just were not areas is where this fell. And I think what Carson said is that language has to kind of be more concise. It's got to be more upbeat. Yeah.
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 See,
So
I was confused because I don't have the teacher language, so I'm like kind of really trying to follow up because I got through this thing as a child. So when you explained that, I knew something had to be, something that I didn't know. So once you explain things like that puts a format of why things happen the way that they did.
yeah, it's not, it's very black and white in some areas, but in some areas it wasn't. So the negotiation became what it was.
And I think that's the issue right there. Because human resources and superintendent believe that we were making decisions based on our interpretation of the contract. They took a different path, and sometimes, so that means that we're either going to resolve it here, or they're going to drop it, or it's going to go to an arbitration. And there are pluses and minuses to each of those, but, you know, in this case, the personnel committee and I felt that a settlement would be most appropriate.
And again, this is not going back 5 years, it's going back 1 year. We made that very clear that we were not willing to go back 5 years. All right, motion on the table to approve the grievance settlement as presented, made by Holly, seconded by Hannah. Any further comments? All right, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed?
No,
All right, so that motion passes 4-1. Thank you. All right, superintendent evaluation is the last piece on our agenda for tonight.
I should have put your name down as the presenter, Pam. I'm
Well,
sorry
you can
about that.
present it if you like. So it's that time of year again where we're talking about the evaluation of the superintendent. This November is usually when we do the full evaluation. So when we did an evaluation this spring, it was a quick check-in. How are things going? This one is the full evaluation. And so I did a lot of digging. You will see that there's an attachment there about a resource for school board members and superintendents from the MSBA, Minnesota School Boards Association. They have an evaluation tool that we can use. Even though this attachment is multi-paged, it actually, the actual tool that we will use will be 1 page or 2 pages because it focuses on a specific goal and the elements of the goal. So even though it seems like it's super long, it actually does condense down to 2 pages, maybe 4 or 5 questions where we would answer 4 is awesome, 3 is not as great, 2 is, we need some improvement, or 1 is blinking red light, something's going amiss, right? And we would have guidance all through. There's a very specific rubric on how you would rate those. So you can read whatever goal we choose for the superintendent. There's a specific rubric that we can follow to answer those questions that we would have. The other piece that I am not opposed to at all is, so on, what night was it? I attended a webinar on the specific topic. So I got the newest, tried and true information about this. And I am not an expert by any means. I went through an hour-long webinar, so I'm not an expert. However, we do have experts at our disposal at MSBA, and they are always willing to come and give us that workshop as a group before we continue on. So I think it might be worth pushing the evaluation back a little bit, if that's something that you are all in favor of, so that we all learn this process before we move forward with it. It doesn't really delay anything. The superintendent contract is 2 years. So as long as we get, I would hope that we would get an evaluation completed before the end of this calendar year. So whether it gets delayed by a couple of weeks because we do a workshop, I think that's worth it. The other piece I will say is that they did recommend that when we do have our evaluation, we've always tagged it on to a school board meeting. And they're really recommending that we have its own standalone 2-hour evaluation process. Because as a board, we don't really get to discuss anything until we're together. And so it makes it really difficult to have a good evaluation when we haven't had a time with the 7 of us to have a discussion before we meet with the superintendent. So they really are saying, you know, as part of that evaluation process, the first half an hour, we should at least the 7 of us have a discussion. The superintendent is okay to be there, but doesn't really involve him necessarily. You can listen to our discussion, but we really need to have some time to work together before we actually give the evaluation. And I think we are putting the cart before the horse. Forgive that pun or metaphor, but you know, I think we, you know, I'm a work in progress, and so you know, I'm trying to learn as we go too. But I feel like their As I put in my email to all of you this week, I really do feel like they have a good tool that we can utilize. I think we need more time to understand it and learn more about it. But I think it would be worth it because they really talk about the fairness and the balanced approach if we use their tool. And I think it's a good tool because it has that rubric and it very specifically states and helps us to be able to answer, what is a 4? What is a 3? I don't know. 2, I'll pick a 2, I don't know. So this really helps us to define that. Comments, I'm open, I'm fine with whatever people want. I really do need your feedback on how we want to proceed.
I really appreciated the tool and especially, like you said, the what is a 4, what is a 3, because otherwise I feel like that's where, you know, even if Nikki and I have the exact same thought about something, you know, and the same exact, like, yes, this is where this is at as far as how good or bad it is. She might pick that as a 3, I might pick it as a 2 or something like that, you know, like I think that just removes that doubt and makes things more straightforward. I really appreciate that. I think it looks really good. What I wasn't sure, and I do think maybe having a workshop would be good so that we can kind of all sift through the details together with MSBA, but where not everything gets reviewed every year, you know, and like, so how does that process work of picking which things? Because,
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, because it is overwhelming. There's 8
Main.
yeah, 8 main things, and then each 8 components has like 5 or 6 or 7 different elements attached to that. So what we do as a board is we have a discussion looking at those 8 main things. What are our priorities?
okay.
And the superintendent certainly can weigh in on that. Here's what I think is, you know, not going great or where we could really beef it up. So we have to choose 1 or 2 of those 8 main things.
Okay.
And then within that, so it's on page 12 of that
Yep.
sheet.
The list of
So say we choose school district finances. Maybe that is our top priority for this next year. That's really where we want the superintendent to focus. So within that, there's 5 different things listed there: budget development and maintenance, financial statements, financial controls, bond and levy, or asset protection. We would look at those 5 areas and say, okay, I really think that we need to focus on the financial controls. I feel like things aren't going well here. We need to figure out and get a better handle on where our money is and how we're keeping track of it. So that's really where we should focus as a district. And then it's up to the superintendent to monitor that and to report back on that specific goal and how it's going. So we get to determine as a group what our priorities are, not just for district, but for our superintendent. Also, our goal should be, MSBA said, you know, the evaluation isn't a hi, gotcha time. It is really about strengthening all of us as a district and as a group to say, you know what, do we need to support you and send you to more professional development so you have a better understanding of financial controls? Is that what we need to do? How do we help him to be more successful in that area? So that's really kind of where the action plan comes in after after we set our priorities and our goals for the superintendent. You know, how do we make that happen? How do we support him or any superintendent in the future to be successful? Because we all want that, right? We all want that. So that's kind of how it works. Yes.
Does it cost anything for us to have the workshop?
It does not cost us anything. We are members of Minnesota School Board Association, and that is a part of our yearly membership.
Yearly fee.
Yeah.
Then I would definitely be interested in free education.
Well, and I think, you know, because we haven't used this process in the past, she can help us figure out what it is based on the goals that we already have set forth for the superintendent, how we can use this tool to evaluate for this year, and then how do we move forward using it in the future. So even though we haven't used it in the past, I would say that we would be able to work with MSBA and they would help us to figure out and move forward. I will say I've worked with Barb Dorn. She's the person at MSBA who is in charge of all things superintendent evaluations and superintendent searches and all of that. And she's, I think we'd really get a lot out of her time with us. So
what do we need to do to make that happen?
yes, I think we need to get a time on the schedule based on when she's available. So I would right away tomorrow morning get on the phone with MSBA, see what their availability is, send out a doodle poll, and hopefully as many of us can attend as possible.
Would it be on a school board night or would it be on an additional night?
Well, if we have a light agenda, we could tack it on.
It could be a workshop night.
Or it could be a workshop night, but this next workshop is kind of filled.
It is unless we
Well, we
delay.
could bump that.
Yep.
Yeah, so that would actually be my preference, is to do it next Monday if they're at all available. It might have to be streamed. I don't know if they're doing any in-person meetings quite yet. So she'd probably be joining us via our screen here, but the webinar was just fine on screen, so I thought it was really helpful.
So I'm hearing you say, if we can get it next Monday, we will try to do that and push the workshop to the next month in November. Are you hearing that?
Well, clear.
And then we can get moving on the evaluation.
Yes, yes.
And if that night doesn't work, then
Another doodle poll, or maybe we can do it after, it's an hour workshop. So if we have a light agenda for November 1st, which we can work on, if we don't have to address something and push it off to the 15th, that would be better, and then we can tack it on after. All right, so it sounds like a plan. Mr. Bryan, anything that you'd like to?
Could have done 2 weeks ago, we were done in 40 minutes, I think.
Let's put Jim in charge, right? And so my other question, in reading through all the stuff that you sent, and maybe this is something that will be covered when we do that workshop, but it seemed to me that they had mid-year as being mid-school year.
Yeah.
Where we did mid-year as and mid-calendar year. So just wondering their guidance about the pros and cons and then what we want to do. as far
Yeah,
as
and we
that
could talk
goes.
with her
So
about
that's-
that. So we had it like that, and then we changed it 3 years ago.
Year and a half ago.
Year and a half ago, to make it feel more in line with, after an evaluation, the next step is to discuss a superintendent contract.
Oh, sure.
So if at an evaluation time, we feel like we needed to make a change, that gives the superintendent enough time to start searching for a new job. And it gives us enough lead time to start putting the feelers out that we're looking for a new superintendent. It's a win-win, I think. As a district, we want to get ahead of the game. If we're looking for somebody new, we want to be one of the first out there to say, hey, we're looking, and to get as many candidates as possible to choose from. So that's kind of why we made the switch. But that was the board at that time, and if this board wants to switch it back, Barb Dorn at MSBA will tell you it's really a district preference. It doesn't really, there's no right or wrong in how you do it. It's just whatever works for this board.
And it also, if there's a leaving superintendent, gives them a chance to put their name in the hat
For sure.
quicker.
Yes.
That's what she said, yeah.
But as you're saying, it gives us,
Well,
It's
it's both. It's both. It's a
win-win.
win-win. It's a win, I mean, it works for both parties. I mean, and that's what we want, right? So, all right, well, I will be in touch with you midday tomorrow after I hear from Barb, and we'll hopefully get something on the calendar very soon and move forward. Are we all okay with that?
all in
Mr. Bryan, you
favor?
good? Thumbs up?
Yeah.
Okay,
Get it done.
get her done. All right, upcoming meetings and future topics. We kind of talked about that already, but anything else to add? Anything to highlight?
The only thing kind of related to last thought, if you could let me know too, as far as timing, because then I can talk to the presenters for Monday night. And they'll be fine
Yeah.
postponing.
Okay,
Yeah, that won't be.
yeah, I will let you know as soon as I get off the
And
phone.
I want to say tonight, I really appreciated questions that were coming from board members, you putting in your board report. Your administrator's report on addressing them and how you address them.
Mhm.
I thought that was really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, because then we're kind of on the same page where different people are inquiring about different things.
Yeah, and I get individual questions all the time from people.
Yeah.
So I try to incorporate a response so everyone can see it about the same time.
Mhm.
I'm not perfect at it, but I kind of like the process.
Yeah, that was very helpful.
Agreed, because with the open meeting law, we can't have a discussion about what other people have questions about.
Right.
So it is really helpful because, I might have the same questions, but just haven't thought to ask. Awesome. Anything else? All right, we'll be meeting next Monday regardless, so that's the next meeting on the schedule at 6 PM right here. Looking for a motion to adjourn. So, Mr. Bryant, motion to adjourn, seconded by Anna. Any other discussion? All right, adjourn 7:32. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
It's no 40 minutes.
Hey, 1:30 isn't bad.
I'd say there was a lot more on the agenda than a certain somebody's agenda.
Yeah.
No finger pointing, just thumb.
What you talking?